start at part 1, chapter 1. We read the beginning of tests yesterday. I'm just going to run through it real quick, so anybody that's on with us, just jump in and interrupt me if you want to. Chapter 1 explains the issue of the Zitzum Aleph when Or Ein Sof became restricted in order to emanate the Ne'etzalim and create the creatures, containing 5 issues. 1, before the Ein Sof filled the entire reality. 2, the reason for creation was the revelation of his names and appellations. 3, the Zimzum of the Or around the middle point. 4, the Halal that remained after the Zimzum was a Gul. 5, because the Or Ein Sof was even, the Zitzum was also even, and this is the meaning of the Agul. Okay, so before the Zimzum, Ein Sof filled the entire reality. Know that before the Netzalim were emanated and the creatures created, an upper simple Or had filled the entire reality. There was no vacant place, such as the empty Avir and the Halal, but everything that was filled with that simple boundless Or. Just meaning that there was just perfection here. It did not have a Behina of Rosh or Sof, but it was all one simple Or, completely even, called the Or Ein Sof, or the endless light. Bear in mind the entire wisdom of Kabbalah is founded on spiritual matters that do not take up time or space. They are not subject to change or absence, and all the changes that are spoken of in this wisdom do not imply that the first form becomes absent and is replaced by a different form. The above change rather implies an additional form. While the first does not move from its place, an absence and change are corporeal conducts. It is difficult for the novice, for they perceive matters by means of corporal boundaries of time, space, change, and etc. And exchange. However, the authors only use those as signs to point to their upper roots. For that reason, I will make an effort to give every word its spiritual identity, detached of space, time, and change. It is up to the readers to memorize these meanings, memorize the meanings of the words thoroughly, for it is impossible to repeat them every time. 1. The issue of spiritual time is explained thoroughly in Histakalut Panimi, chapter 9, item 33. 2. It refers the Or that expands from the Atzmut of the Creator. Know that all the names and appellations that appear in the wisdom of Kabbalah are not at all in the Atzmut of the Creator, but only in the Or that expands from his Atzmut. Atzmut is essence. However, we cannot utter even a single word regarding his Atzmut, for the rule is that anything we do not attain, we do not know its name. Remember that and you will not fail. So because we don't have, we only have the idea of the action of the Creator and how it affects us, and we can only know him by those actions. We can't ever try to guess his essence, his thoughts, his ideas, his concepts is not for us to do. We're just going to go by how he acts. 3, it is seemingly perplexing, for it speaks of a time before the Olamot were created, meaning that we're talking about a time before there were worlds. Okay, so thus, which reality exists here that the Or Elyon should fill? So he's asking where, if this is before the worlds, then what are we talking about? This doesn't make sense. The thing is that all the Olamot is worlds, and the Neshama, souls, that exist and that are destined to be created with all their incidents until the end of their correction, are all included in the Ein Sof in their full measure and glory. Thus, there are two rudiments we should discern in reality before us. There are fixed and exist in Ein Sof with they are fixed and exist in Ein Sof with their full measure and glory. Okay, let me finish. And how they are arranged and hang down and innovate before us after the Zitzum Aleph in the 5 Olamot: Adam Kadmon, Atzilut, Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. The Rav writes that the Or Elyon that extends from his Atzmut had filled the entire reality, meaning that the entire reality of this first rudiment relating to their existence in Ein Sof before the Zitzum. All right, let me just say here, we're talking about the test goes into sections, so the beginning section here is obviously talking prior to the Olamot, to the worlds. We're talking about a time when it was just the light, or actually just the Ein Sof. It was perfection. We don't understand really what that means, but it was endless and infinite. Then what happens is there's a seemingly perplexing change that happened that then somehow this Ein Sof, this limitless perfection that existed everywhere, withdrew itself into this circle, okay, this orb, and inside that orb created the reality we call the worlds, and subsequently our reality called the Sia, or this world, this reality we exist in. So we have this reality, we have all the worlds above it, and beyond that we have this perfect infinite space. So what Tess is doing is explaining that first step, just the infinite side, and then how the worlds were graduated out of that. He tells us that the Or Elyon filled them entirely until they had no vacant space left where correction or perfection could be added whatsoever. It means that before the Olamot were created, there was only Ein Sof, which means no end, the limitless idea of God. That there weren't a vacant place, meaning a place of dearth that would qualify for corrections because the Or Elyon filled that place. It left no room for Taktonim to distinguish themselves and add something to his completeness. So because there was perfection, the vessels, whether they existed or not, we could say they didn't exist there, they did exist there. The Rav is saying that they were already there. But because it filled everything, there was no need, no lack, no desire, there was nothing. There was no life. Nothing could exist in this because it had no desire to grow, to breathe, to exist. It was in perfection. It means that before the Olamot were created, there was only Ein Sof. There weren't a vacant place, meaning a place of dirt that would qualify for corrections because the Or Elyon filled that place. It left no room for Taktonim to distinguish themselves and add something else to his completeness. So we just talked about that. Because of the Zimzum, there came about a wanting and a vacant place for corrections. However, do not be mistaken to think that the book speaks of a corporal place. Okay, so he's saying that this now restriction of this light, where the Ein Sof restricts itself in this orb, or this agul, this circle, all right, we're calling it a circle, that because it does that, it allows room for these worlds to now grow and exist, because it's removing itself from that space, so to speak. And it's saying that this isn't a corporal air. This space isn't corporal space the way we see it. It's something else. It's not like we see here in this reality. It's far from this. So I see myself, I see Philippe, and there's 10 feet between us. We call that air or space between us. It's not the same kind of space. This does not refer to corporal air whatsoever, but there is a spiritual or, spiritual light, that is called by that name. There are two behinot, two features or distinctions or stages or attributes of this or, this air, that in each complete partsuf, or Chachma and or di Hasidim. All right, those are two different lights. All right, or Chachma is the azmut of the partsuf, meaning its vitality. So we know atzmut is the essence. So the or Chachma makes the partsuf, depending on its level, give it its essence. It creates what it is, what it's about internally, its vitality. Or Hasidim only operates as a clothing of the or over the Or Chachma in the Partsuf. Since Or Chachma cannot permeate the Partsuf, it does not wear the Or Hasidim first. So, and again, we're talking about some fundamentals that it's going to explain, but we have the Or Chachma that permeates the Partsuf, and there's a clothing on that light called Or Hasidim. Okay? The Or Chachma cannot penetrate the Partsuf unless the Or Hasidim is clothed in it. However, sometimes when a Partsuf are in Katnut, which just means small, like child, sort of, they do not have more than Or Hasidim. You should know that the Or Hasidim is called Avir or Ruach, like air, spirit. When it is by itself, without Or Chachma, it is called empty Avir, meaning empty of Or Chachma. Then it waits for Or Chachma to clothe it and fulfill it. So it's saying that there's a degree at which the Partsuf is in a child state or a small state, and it only has this one type of light called Or Hasidim. Okay, it doesn't have the Or Chachma. So it really doesn't have its own, let me not say that. It just needs to have the Or Chachma also penetrated, clothed in this Or Hasidim, and we'll get into that in a second. The Rav tells us that before the Olamot were created, meaning the Ein Sof, such empty Avir did not exist in reality at all, because there was not any dearth there. When he says Rav, he's talking about the Ari. 6. To understand that word, you must first know the essence of a spiritual kli, a spiritual desire or vessel. Since the Ne'etzal receives its sustenance from the Matzil, it necessarily implies that it has a ratzon, or desire, a yearning to receive that shefa from him. So this is basic. So it means that if I have a vessel, I have to also have a desire. Because when the vessel is full of light, there's no more desire. All right? So there has to be a desire in that vessel in order for it to exist. And this is what we talked about at first. There was only the Or Ein Sof, right? Only the Ein Sof that filled the entire reality. There could not be any vessels there because there's no yearning, there's no desire. So now that we've created this restriction, now that the Ein Sof has created this space, seemingly in this igul, this circle, or whatever orb, whatever we want to call it, that it allows the yearning to start, the desiring of these vessels for it, and that was its goal. So know that the amount of ratzon and yearning in the entire substance that exists in the Netzal, okay? So, thus, everything that exists in the Netzal that is not that substance no longer relates to its substance, but to the shefa that it receives from the Ma'atzil. Furthermore, this substance determines the gadlut and the level of each Netzal, each partsuf, and each sphira. The hipashtut of the Or Elyon from the Ma'atzil is certainly immeasurable, but it is the Ne'etzil, it is the vessel that limits the shefa, the substance, for it receives no more or no less than its measure, the vessel's measure of the desire to receive. This is the criteria in spirituality because there's no coercion there. It depends entirely on the ratzon, the desire. So this is important. What it's saying is that there's an infinite amount of light to receive that's been given to it by the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof says, here is infinite light, okay? But the vessel is only able to contain what it can based on its desire for it. All right? So it's only able to grab and go after what it can hold. And as we climb, we'll see later on that the vessel actually grows. Okay, it actually builds a desire here at some point too. Okay, for that reason we call this will to receive the vessel of reception of the Ne'etzal. It is regarded as its substance, and the reason that it stopped being regarded as the Ma'atzil and was dominated by the Ne'etzal. Okay? The Ne'etzal is defined by a substance that does not exist in the Ma'atzil whatsoever, for there is absolutely no will to receive in the Ma'atzil, because from who would he receive? So, in this paragraph, he's simply saying that we're calling this thing a vessel of reception inside the Ne'etzal, okay? And this vessel of reception is not part of, it's not involved in, it has nothing to do with the Ma'atzil. This is a new thing that was created, so the vessel could go after the source, after the Ein Sof.
Well, I hope that everyone understands what is the Ma'atzil and the Ne'etzal. Ma'atzil is from the term Atzilut, the emanator, and Ne'etzal, the one that is enemative, that receives the light. I just wanted to clarify in case someone didn't know.
That's a great point. So I'm sorry about that. Philippe is right. So if we don't understand, we have the Ne'etzal and the Ma'atzil. So these are the two parts playing with each other. The Ma'atzil is the source of this shefa, this source of the substance that the Ne'etzal wants. Okay, so again, on a basic level, just think of it this way: we have a desire that's formed as soon as this substance is pulled away from it. So as soon as I move away from this substance, if I'm the Ein Sof, it chases me. It wants me. So in order for me to create a desire that wants me, I have to move away from it. Okay? But then we have this game now, and I know there's a lot of words. It sounds, we're dealing with a lot of terms and a lot of new concepts. We're talking about the formation of the worlds. This is the creation of the worlds that we're going to lead down to our world. We're also going to talk about Gan Eden, the garden, and Adam and Hava, and all these consequences and everything that's happened to form the world here, which is good because we want to understand the root. You know, we have the branch here. We can't do anything with the branch. We have to understand the root first, and that's what we're trying to get to. So to understand first, there was all perfection. Perfection pulled away from a space that it created, where it still existed and didn't exist as far as the vessel was concerned. And it caused the vessel to wake up, to almost be born, and then hunt after the source, the stuff, the substance. Okay, so Now we will explain how the 4 degrees in this substance, from katnut to gadlut of reception. The 4th degree, being the gadlut of reception, is complete only in Ein Sof. Before the olamot, before the worlds were created, it is the only one that was subject to the Zimzum, and we will clarify henceforth that it was emptied of every shefa that she had from Ein Sof and remained a vacant halal. This is what the Rav means when he says that before the olam was created, meaning in the Ein Sof, vacant halal did not exist. 7. This means that there is nothing that the lower ones could add to it by means of their actions. Very important, and we forget this. There is nothing we can add to it by our actions, nothing. So we have to get that out of our mind. This is where we get caught up in most of our religious thinking. We're not adding, serving. We need to not. Ein Sof needs nothing from us except for us to receive. It only needs us to take. We can't do anything to change it. It's perfect, right? So we have to realize that. It's an important point, okay? And when we see reward and punishment and all these other things that we'll get into, this is ridiculous. There's no such thing. It's not trying to beat us up for not making it better or fixing its mistakes. There is no such thing, okay? 8, the terms Rosh and Sof will be explained below. Rosh and Sof is just the body and the head of the Partsuf, the spiritual Partsuf. 9, meaning without discrimination, small and great, everything is even. Very important point, okay? There's no discrimination spiritually, okay? There's only our perception of where we sit. That's the vital key. 10, where there is no zakut and aviyut by which the degrees are set, these discriminations were established only with the renewal of Zimzum. So, because we have this false reality that was created. We call it false because it's really not, it's only false to us. It's not false to the Ein Sof. To the Ein Sof, everything's still in perfection. There's no stages, there's no timing, there's nothing. It's just all perfect. So it created a false reality we could exist in, I like to call the sandbox, where we can play and do all sorts of things and figure out it to climb back up into this perfection again, but hold a piece of ourselves in it and attain forever pleasure, right? Infinite pleasure. So when it says Zakut and Aviyut, we're talking about my ability to revelate this light. All right, these are degrees. It'll explain further along here, and these are words that it'll use as we get deeper in the text, but it's explaining my ability, my strength to maintain a certain degree of light, revelation of light. All right? And so, we'll go into it more. 20, we should ask, since we have no attainment in Ein Sof, how then do we know him by name? After all, each name designates the attainment that we attain in him, according to the definition of that name. We cannot excuse ourselves by saying that the name merely points to a negation of attainment, but then we should have named him unattainable. All right, so the rabbi's saying an important point, and throughout tests, he picks apart every small detail. There's nothing that these guys don't miss, and nothing's done by these sages half-hearted. Everything's done perfectly. So he's saying that if it's limitless, how do we know that? How are you saying it's limitless if we can't attain him? Okay, and we can only attain that which we name, so what's going on here? So the answer to this is, the thing is that the name indicates the entire difference between the Ein Sof and all the Olamot beneath it. The Zimzum took place after the Ein Sof. Thus, in every place that this force awakens, it restricts the Or that ends the Ha'ara in that place. Hence, any Sof and Siyum, ending, okay, or bottom, in any Ha'ara, in any Partsuf comes solely from the Zimzum. Moreover, all the beings and all their various fillings in the Olamot, the worlds, come about and are innovated because of that Sof and Siyum. It is called Ein Sof because the Zimzum does not apply there. The restriction doesn't apply in Ein Sof, in the limitless, indicating that there isn't any ending there whatsoever. It's infinite. With that, we can deduce that this Or, this light, is Pashut and completely even, for one depends on the other. The reason for creation was the revelation of his names and appellation. Now, before we get into the next section, basically the answer is this. Because because we understand that the Zimzum is purposely made to cause a restriction of the infinite. Okay? Otherwise, the Zimzum, the restriction wouldn't be necessary. If it was finite, there would be no need for a restriction. Okay? And this is something that's tough to grapple with in the beginning. When you get through the text more, it'll start to be apparent to you. But understanding spiritually that this restriction, because it came into place, automatically justifies the infinite side of it. Okay? Because there'd be nothing again to restrict if it was permanent. I mean, if it was static and finite. When it rose upon his simple Ratzon to create the Olamot and emanate the Na'atzilim, to bring the perfection of his deeds, his names and appellations to light, which was the reason of the creation of the Olamot. We need not wonder, this is 30 by the way, we need not wonder how there is a Ratzon in Esaf. He's asking, we don't need to worry about having a desire in the endless, in the infinite, who is higher than any notion, to which we can say, rose upon his simple Ratzon. You should comprehend what has been said above, that in every Ne'etzal there is by necessity a will to receive the Shefa from the Ma'atzil. However, in the Ein Sof, it is a simple Ratzon, because he is one and his name is one. The Or in Ein Sof is called he, and the will to receive is called his name. And they are simple unity without any form of separation. So every time we see in the text, he is one and his name is one, it means that they're sitting in a boundless state. That these two seemingly separate parts are actually totally unified in Ein Sof. Okay. The only time that we find this separation is in the worlds. That's the only time. Okay. And it's explained more as we go. So some of these concepts are going to be difficult to grapple with in our minds, but we'll get through them as we go forward. It's going to unfold it all. However, we should not resemble the unity and separation discussed here with the corporal unity and separation that are distinguished by motion, nearness, and distance. This is because the spiritual essence does not take up any space. In spirituality, as a note, there's no such thing as distance. There's only distance by variance in form. So, and this is impossible to talk about, but I'll just say this. When you have two spiritual objects that are similar, they bind together. If we look at a cell in a human body, when the cell starts to contain a certain energy or vibration, it starts to break apart. And we see the vesica piscis breaking apart into two cells. That cell slowly bursts the other cell because of the variance in vibration wave, right? It seemingly thinks there's two parts that are different in itself. And so for those two parts break away. And they become distanced and separate entities, divisions. In the same way, spirituality, it works that way, but it's not separated by space. It's separated by something different. Having said that, you should know that separation in spirituality occurs only by means of the Shinui Zura, which is just different parts, essentially. Thus, if one spiritual thing acquires an additional Zura, additional parts, that is unlike its current part, it stops being one and becomes two separate entities. Their distance from each other is measured by their oppositeness of form. So, to the degree that their parts are opposites or different in some stance, that measurement justifies their separation, their distance. Just as corporal entities connect and separate through proximity and remoteness, so spiritual entities connect and separate according to their difference and equivalence of form. The Shinui Zura separate them from one another, and the Hishtavut Zura brings them together, the same parts, similar parts. Remember that for it is key element to this wisdom. Why is he saying that? Well, because this is really the fundamental basis. Okay, my goal is to merge with the light. Okay, in this world we talk about this. We chase desires so I can receive light. Right. Within the desire is energy. We just talked about recently that money is energy. Right. Money itself is energy. I want money because money somehow translates into energy in this world. It's the same thing we see with food. We see it with sex, with power, with knowledge. All these things, they're just clothing around energy, right? So we seek out this energy. And what we're really seeking is we're seeking all of these layers of clothing, and we're really seeking the inside thing, We really just want the light, okay? And not that it takes the form of energy like we see in this world, but there's something beneath it. As we tear apart the cell, the atom, and we go down into the quark and all these things, there's some other universal dark matter that just exists and moves things that we just can't see or understand. That's really what we're looking for. We want to sit in that primordial soup. So what we have to understand is that my goal isn't really to have a new Corvette. My goal isn't to have a better job. My goal is to eliminate my lack of this thing, this substance. Okay? When we tear apart the job, and we tear apart the money and the power and the knowledge and the stuff, we get down to what we really want, okay, which is that peace again, that filling, all right? And the problem with this world is we receive the filling, but because we receive it in the wrong, with the wrong circumstances, the wrong state, the light goes from us immediately, okay? I don't maintain the same level of excitement when I walk into Disneyland that a week later I have from thinking about it. I might still think that it was a great experience, whatever, or some concert I went to, or some event that I saw, some play, or something like that. But it's not the same as me sitting there that day, right? Because it was that excitement and filling I got from it. That I allowed the light to fill me to a certain extent because I had some enjoyment, and yet it went dissipated. And so what we find ourselves doing is searching for that filling every day, every moment, all the time. And this is why they say we're enslaved to our egoistic desire. Okay, because I can't stop searching for it. It's leading me to keep getting pleasure. And this is the decline of not only, the world, but individuals. We see it all over the place. Okay, everything is collapsing around us. Our industries, our finance, everything's falling apart in our world. And it's all based on the fact that we cannot fill this desire that we have. Okay, so what we're trying to establish is that's not really what we want. We want something else.
Like Raz, in a sense, like what you were saying, the tzura is the form. So when they're telling me that I'm getting the pleasure, but I'm getting in a shinui tzura, in a different form, and the bigger is the shinui, the difference of the pleasure, how I get it, the farther it is away from the light. The closer it is, the istavut of tzura, when the tzura, the form, is very similar to the one I'm seeking, then indeed I am getting closer. So when I'm getting the light in the right form, the pleasure in its right form, then I'm getting closer to really the goal that I seek. And the further I am getting, the more I enjoy the pleasure of the material, the farther I am from it.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So we were talking about what Philippe is saying, that we mentioned the Shinui Zura, the different parts, and so he's just applying that formula there. So when we accept the light in a different form than the Ein Sof has the light, we are actually drawing ourselves away from it. Therefore, we're actually eliminating the light from ourselves. We can accept the light in the right form, right? Then we are drawing ourselves closer to it. So really this game of drawing closer and drawing further away is what we need to understand. It has nothing to do with the physical world. We have to understand this internally and how we play this game, because that's really where we find this peace. If I can find out how to attach myself to that light closer and closer, I then really overcome all of my lacking. I really will find a peaceful place rather than going through these wars of gaining, falling, and constantly chasing in the wrong parts, the wrong form of the light. Okay, so let me continue here. We have witnessed the difference between the Ma'atzil and the Ne'etzil that was formed by the Zura, of that will to receive that exists in the Ne'etzil and not in the Ma'atzil. So it exists. We've seen it exist in the desire, but not the source. Because of the Shinui Zira, the Ne'etzil became separated from the Ma'atzil and acquired its own separate name, meaning Na'atzil and not Ma'atzil. So basically, because it got separated to a certain degree, it actually became its own thing. It was no longer completely satiated with the light, and being part of that, he is one and his name is one idea. It fell out to a degree where it became its own thing, its own soul, its own entity. The above explanation might mislead us to think that the Or Ein Sof called he is not entirely adherent with Ein Sof called his name, meaning the will to receive the Or and the Shefa called he. That is because the Or Elyon that extends from his Atzmut, his essence, called he, has but one attribute, to bestow, and none of the Zura of the will to receive. So The attribute that comes out of the Ein Sof, okay, we call the Creator, is actually a will to bestow, only to give, because it has no lack. So it just wants to flow and give and pour. It wants to give. This is how it gets its pleasure, but we can't really say it has a desire for pleasure at all. We don't understand how it functions because it's opposite to us. It just endlessly gives, okay? It gives itself to us endlessly. That's what it does. We don't function this way, okay? Because we're a part of it from its restriction, we desire it. We're opposite to it, okay? And this doesn't change in Kabbalah or in any esoteric wisdom. This is not like we are going to become God. And we always hear people saying, you are God. This is not true. This is not right. We don't become God. We stay a vessel, but we change our form slightly in order to work with the Ein Sof correctly, okay? We just have to learn. We have to grow, mature, and evolve, and work with the Ein Sof in order to get that endless pleasure. However, Ein Sof called his name. Remember, there's he and his name. We're seeing these two parts. And really all that means is him and his light. Okay? However, the Ein Sof called his name, which does not have a will to receive, is therefore different from the Or Elyon, which has no will to receive whatsoever, as has been explained. And we know that the Shinui Zera separates. Okay? So it's saying that the Creator and his light have no difference of form. They're both the will to give. The light is the will to bestow. It doesn't have the will to receive in it. And we know that the different parts cause a separation. However, the Midrash and the Rab tell us that this is not so. Instead, he is one and his name is one in simple unity, meaning there's no difference between them. Although there is necessarily a difference of form between he and his name, between the Ein Sof and its light, it is nevertheless completely inactive there. We do not understand it, but it is undoubtedly so. It is said about that there is no perception or thought in the Ein Sof whatsoever. Since this matter is above our mind, will be discussed further in the next item. So we're going to go over this, bringing up the fact that we would struggle with saying, well, we want to delve into the thoughts of the Creator. We want to say, well, why? What is he doing? Why would he do this for? How can you give forever? How is his light different than him? And how do I know him? All of these questions pop up, and we sort of have to understand that a lot of this is non-negotiable, sort of, because we really can't wrap around this yet. So we're going to go into the Zitzum a little more, and then we're going to start talking about the worlds and how they were created. The Zimzum of the Or around the middle point. Ein Sof restricted himself to the middle point. In the very middle, restricted that Or and drifted to the sides around the middle point. It's describing a circle. Okay, Agol, this round place. 40. You already know the meaning of he is one and his name is one. We have him and his light. Although there is a Shinui Zera with respect to the will to receive incorporated in the Ein Sof, this still does not create any differentiation between that and the Or Elyon. They are in simple unity. Still, this Shinui Zera has become the reason and the cause for the creation of the Olamot, to bring perfection of his deeds, his names, and appellations to light, as the Rav says here. So, saying that there is a creation, only the vessel, the creature was created only, and we're not really talking about the creature yet, we're still talking about a desire, okay? The creature's not really here yet, but the only reason it was created is to bring, and they keep going back to bring perfection of his deeds, his names, and appellations, okay? We want to attain perfection through him and his name, because they're one, right? We want to attain perfection through this. That's the goal here. The creation of the Olamot and their concatenation down to the Olam Hazeh created and renewed the possibility to give room for work in Torah and Mitzvah, not in order to receive, but only to bestow contentment upon the Maker. It is then that the Neshimot became able to invert the form of the will to receive in them, which separates them from the Ma'atzil into the form of the will to bestow contentment upon Him, which is what He wants, all right? So basically, we can assume and know from the sages and what they tell us. Okay, the Arizal says that he is giving us the ability to change our form in a certain way, so that we receive in order to give back to him. We change the way we perceive this environment, and because of that, we break through the veils of the false reality he created around us in this circle, and we Okay, we break back through it and we join back with him. Okay, but now in a fully grown-up way, a gadlut, a large, big way. Okay, so as you can imagine, and I always, when I first started reading these texts, there is a huge, you can see how this would, a lot of rabbis would struggle with this, because this breaks down the order of the Torah and mitzvah to a very, very detailed science. And so there's no more, we're not looking at having a bunch of faith here. We're talking about having actual attainment of this. And these are the instructions of attainment. And so this is important. It doesn't take away from the ideas of Torah and mitzvah at all. In fact, it builds them, their importance, right? But it's still an interesting concept, and it's still, would definitely ruffle feathers. We can see the issues with something like this, talking about this kind of science. And this was, obviously, hundreds of years ago, right? It is then that the neshama, the souls, become able to invert the form of the will to receive in them, which separates them from the ma'atzil, into the form of the will to bestow contentment upon him, which is what he wants, right? So this is the hishtavut zura with the ma'atzil, called divukut, adhesion and unification. It is so because then they have already been stripped from the form of the will to receive and acquired the form of the will to bestow, being the form of the ma'atzil himself. So the entire principal purpose of us being created at all was to flip our wills, our ideas of reception to bestowal, which is really the egoistic nature we have now to receive for ourselves, into this balanced form of receiving for bestowal. It's different. To give to the entire, to take the light we get and give it out back to the Maker, or the entire system itself. And essentially you can look at this as a way of evolution and growth, the same way we'd look at a child. All right? In the beginning, we have a baby, we nurse it, we hold it, we feed it, we do everything for it. We change its diapers, we put it to bed, we sing to it, we burp it, all these things. It has no life of its own at all. But over time, we have to slowly start to push it away from us, the same way the Creator did, and created a zimzum, a restriction. I have to let the baby cry sometimes in the crib. It's good. The baby needs to have that longing, and then I go back and I hold and hug and love it, and then I give we have to let it grow. If we coddled the child completely and never stopped feeding it and doing all this stuff, the child would never grow to adulthood. It would be lame. We would actually hurt it. And so obviously we can't take something spiritual and make it physical. So the relationship between that story isn't exact. And obviously there's a lot of concepts that don't fit there. But it's still the same idea. It's still the same basic idea. You already know that hishtavut zura makes the spirituals become one. For that reason, olamat return to their previous condition. This is the meaning of the Rav's words when it rose upon his simple ratzon to create, etc. It rose. Means that he increased the purification and devakut by diminishing the measure of the will to receive and printed him in order to equalize the form of the Or Elyon. We want to merge again with the light, this light. The will to receive in Ein Sof, called Malhut di Ein Sof, or his name, did not have any dearth in Divakut with the Or Elyon because of its Shinui Zura. We'll get back to that. However, it embellished himself in order to equalize its form with the Or Elyon and depart from the great will to receive called Bihina Dalit. So it was to cleave more strongly to the Or Elyon. Okay, this is very big paragraph here, okay? And we're going to start rolling out here in a kind of a fast pace. The will to receive in the Ein Sof, called Malhut. So now we're going to the tree. We have two polar opposites on the tree. We have Keter and we have Malhut, right? The top and bottom. In this instance, Malhut of Ein Sof was in a perfect position. It needed nothing. It was completely full of light. There was nothing wrong in that scenario, okay? But there's some action, the Rav is telling us, that at some point, Malhut decided that, or the Creator decided, we're not sure, but it seems to be Malhut, the desire, that there was going to be there was an understanding that there was a difference in parts. So Malhut eventually came to some point where it evolved to the place of saying, hey, I'm receiving totally here, and I don't understand it. I'm not sure what's going on. And so this sort of in and of itself caused some lacking, right? Some need to know, something it didn't understand. And this was a growth of some type. So the perfect entity of bestowal, this Ein Sof, creates this thing, and it slowly starts to evolve itself, okay? And the first thing it does is decide it wants to stop receiving, okay? Because it's not sure what's going on, okay? So in order to understand, there's only two options. I can either receive or I can't. That's it. It's my only options. It's either 0 or 1, right? So it makes a decision that it wants to break away, all right, in an effort to understand the giver, all right? And this is a very odd thing, because you'd think if it was in perfection, it would sit there and never move a muscle. But there's some other development now in Malhut and Ein Sof that decides, no, I need to grow in some way. And that growth comes in the form of the question, how come I'm taking and he's giving? I want to be like that. So the proximity of the Zura, the parts, makes for Devakut. Okay, it is expressed in the words, it rose, meaning Malhut the Ein Sof being the Ratzon, the desire. Pashut rose and cleaved to the Or Elyon, meaning diminished her will to receive. This is the meaning of the words of the Rav. Ein Sof then restricted himself. It has already been explained above that the entire measure of his shifa, the substance of the Creator, and the light, and the height of the Ne'etzal are measured by the amount of will to receive in him. Okay? Thus, since the above Malhut, the Ein Sof, the creature, the desire in the endless, restricted herself and diminished her will to receive, the Or and the Shefa departed due to the scantness of the desire. This is the meaning of the Zimzum. The ascent of the desire caused the departure of the Shefa and the Or from there. So this is basically just saying a simple thing. It created this Malhut in Ein Sof, this desire, and it sat back and watched the desire start to grow. And as the desire grew, it became more opposite than the source. And because of that very different differentiation between the two, it fell. Okay, it moved away. Because we know in spirituality there's only two ways to go, together or away. That's it. So because of the difference, because Malhut continued to evolve and develop, it became further separated, and because of that we have a restriction. Okay, 50, and we'll go just a minute more and we'll talk about this more in depth with everybody. It is perplexing, for since there is neither a Rosh nor Sof there, how is there middle? Moreover, are we dealing with corporal matter here? Another question. So the rabbi's asking a few questions here. What's going on? The thing is that this has already been explained, that there is necessarily a will to receive in Ein Sof too. However, it is Ratzon Pashut, without discriminations of great and small, because the will to receive there is not regarded as Shinui Zura, that makes any separations. Consequently, it is no way inferior to the Or Elyon. So this is a weird thing. And when I first read this, I didn't understand this for a long time. There's a will to receive in the Ein Sof. It's called the desire, and it sits there in perfection. So what we're understanding is it's saying on the one hand that there's no desire to receive in the Creator, the Ein Sof, but at the same time there's the desire to receive existing in it in perfection with no greater or smaller degree. Wouldn't that be considered the desire to receive in the Creator? Or, and so we're asking these questions just to kind of put them out there. All right. Later it comes through in the work. You should know that the Or Elyon must expand via 4 degrees before it uncovers the will to receive in its fullest and permanent measure in the Ne'etzal. So it's saying that this desire is sort of stretched out. As it grows, it sort of falls down 4 various degrees until it comes out as its own thing. Otherwise, it's fully encompassed in the Ein Sof. Okay, as soon as it hits this 4th degree, it becomes a separate thing because of its growth, right? And we call that the Malhut of Ein Sof, right? the reason for it is that the will to receive is incorporated in the hit pashut of or from the shorish, and by that the or is considered to have departed from the ma'atzel and acquired its own name, meaning hit pashtut from the ma'atzel. So it's saying here that as soon as it hits this fourth degree, it becomes its own thing and its own name. It's no longer part of he and his name are one. It's not part of the Ein Sof anymore, and now it's because of its separation, it has its own place. As long as this Shinui Zera of the will to receive was not incorporated in it, it was still regarded as the Ma'atzil. It's saying it was still part of the source. There weren't two parts there. And not as hit pashtut, that departed and shifted from the Ma'atzil, the desire to grow on its own that became its own thing. That is because the only difference in spirituality is the Shinui Zera, as we said. However, as much as this ratzon, this desire, became disclosed by the force of the Na'atzil, meaning it grew, no matter as much as it grew, it still was not permanent in the Ne'etzal. It means that the Ne'etzal must yearn to receive the Shefa before it is considered the will to receive it. Before it is considered that the will to receive it appeared by the force of the Ne'etzal. This is confusing. It's saying the same thing. That
Raz, that's in case people don't understand what Ishpastut is. It's like expansion. It extended from.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I keep thinking that we know some of these words. Hit pashtut means, yes, exactly, that it's growing from, it's expanding from. And it basically just reiterated exactly what we talked about. So there's 4 stages it must go through until it becomes a separate name, a separate entity. So it's sort of this gestation period that it goes through, these 4 steps. And again, this part of Tess is talking about the very fundamental stuff, because what happens directly after this is we jump into the language of the Sephirot in fierce degree. So these fundamentals of understanding the structure of creation here have to be grasped. If we don't have this, the house won't stand at all. So we're going to try to get through a few more paragraphs here before we go off. Where am I here? Okay, so you should also know that any hit pashtut of or, of light, from the ma'atzil, from the source, must consist of a will to bestow, just as it consists of a will to receive. Otherwise, the ma'atzil and the ne'etzil would have been an oppositeness of form, meaning in total separation, and the oppositeness of form would then depart them from one another as west departs from east. So it's just making mention that, yes, we know the will to receive builds and slowly builds through 4 steps and then departs from the source. But there also has to be the other side, the will to bestow, contained within the Ne'etzal as well. We have to realize that, because if it didn't have that side, it would instantly be broken apart. There would be no steps. It would just fall out and be completely separated. So that doesn't happen here. So what it's really saying to us is that there's a will to bestow that breaks off slowly because the increasing will to receive, but the will to bestow still sits inside. Okay? As the will to receive graduates and becomes larger, that causes the hit pashtut, this separation. That's what causes it. So both of those things are there. And we have to understand that too. That's important later. Thus, each or that expands from the ma'atzil must be incorporated of a will to bestow as well, so that the ne'etzil will have proximity of form with the ma'atzil. When the will to bestow appears in the ne'etzil, a great or nimshach to him from the ma'atzil related to that awakening. The or is always referred to as or di hasidim. Okay, and let's do one more. Hit pashtut aleph, meaning the first degree of drawing away or expanding from the ma'atzil, from the source, in which the will to receive is incorporated, is always referred to as the or di hakma, or di atzmut. So it's saying there's 2 stages here. The first stage is called the or di hakma, the light of hakma, or wisdom, the light of wisdom, or the or di atzmut, or the essence of the or, the light of his essence. You should memorize these 2 types of orat. So the or di hasadim is the light of mercy, Hasadim is like mercy. Rachamim, actually, I think is mercy. Hasadim is, Philippe, what's the better word?
Kindness.
There you go. Yes, Hesed, right. So Hasadim is actually, they say the light of mercy. It's actually not. Hasadim means kindness, and Philippe's right. It's the light of kindness, but they usually call it the light of mercy. So if you hear it, mercy's Rachamim, not Hasadim, so it's kind of a similar word, but sort of use it as the light of mercy. The Or Hakma means, Hakma is obviously wisdom, so it's the light of wisdom. It's also called the Or Elyon, the light of the endless light, or the source light, or the light of his essence. You can use all these names for the Or Hakma. And later we'll see when we have the Partsuf that it becomes the Or Hoser and the Or Yashar, and they take on different names. But most importantly are these two lights, because one encloses the other. And we have to understand the operation here in order to break this down and facilitate it internally. So we have those two lights. So the second Or, being the Or Hasadim, is much lower than the first Or, being the Or Hakma. That is because it is extended by the Hitz Gabrut and the awakening of the Ne'etzal by his force, as he wants to equalize his form with the Ma'atzil, for which reason he intensifies himself and awakens toward the will to bestow. Okay, so basically this higher light of Or Hakma is necessary because this is really where we're going to bridge. This is a goal that we need to slowly incorporate in ourselves as we grow. We have to have that Or Hakma. Later we'll discuss how these influence the Partsuf in different ways, but right now I think it's clear enough. However, Hit Pashtut Aleph being Or Di Hakma, the first degree of separation is the Or of wisdom. Nimshach, directly from the Ma'atzil and the Ne'etzil, has no part in its extension. For that reason, it is much higher than it. Philippe, Nimshach, what's the good way to translate this?
Mosher is pulled from.
There you go.
Yeah, because in a sense, that's why the distinction is made. It is not separated.
Right.
But the Netzal is not separated within the Ma'atzil. It's a one and self. But that pulling creates that, and it's only the Or Hasadim, is for the kindness, and that's why they say it is Nimshach by the
Ma'atzil.
By the Ma'atzil, yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so that's a great way, pulling, yeah. So the two different ways of understanding this is one is a push and one is a pull, and that's kind of a good way to look at it. So later on, this is going to be clarified a lot more, and we'll go through it a lot more. For that reason, Or Hakma is regarded as the Atzmut and the Hayut, sustenance of the Ne'etzal. Or Di Hasadim is only considered as Or for corrections, for the completion of the Ne'etzal. So that's interesting, because that actually talks about what Philippe mentioned. So the Or for corrections, okay, means that I'm going to be dealt with differently in one of the lights, and I'm going to have a different experience with one of the lights and a different experience with the other light, okay? This is two ways for the Creator to play with me. And that's why these two lights are important. Now you will understand the four Behinot and degrees that must be in every Ne'etzal. First, the Or expands from the Ma'atzil as Or Hakma, containing only the will to receive. This is Behina Aleph. So we talked about this, the first stage, Behina being that stage. Midat is attribute. Behina, it's like a stage, is Aleph being one. So the first step or stage, first degree is this Or Hakma. Then the will to bestow intensifies in that Or, and it extends to Or Di Hasadim. This Hit Gabrut is regarded as Behina Bet. Then this Or Hasadim expands intensively, will be explained below, and this Behina into this Behina Gimel. So we're talking about we said there were four stages that the drawing out from, or the Hit Pashtut occurs in. There's 4 degrees. They're now discussing, the rabbi's now discussing these 4 degrees so that we understand what are they, how do they work. The first degree is called Or Hakma, or the Behina Aleph, that first degree. The second degree is then called Or Hasadim. or Bihina Bet. The difference between the first degree and the second degree is night and day. And this is where we start to build the pillars on the tree here, because we're actually creating a right and a left. And because of that, Bihina Aleph is the total adhesion with the light to the degree that it receives from it perfectly. And Bihina Bet is the degree to which it refuses to receive from it at all. Okay, that Or Hasidim is a total refusal. The reason why Or Hasidim is a degree less than Or Hakma, okay, is because the ego is larger in Bina, in Bihina Bet, in the Or Hasidim, in the second stage. And so, why is it greater? It's greater because in this stage, it actually now refuses to take because it wants to be larger, right? Whereas in Hakma, it's satisfied with taking in perfection. So this second stage is actually in a continuation of development of the ego. And then we have a third stage called Bihina Gimel. And Gimel just means 3. After the above 3 Behinot fully emerge, the force of the will to receive incorporated in the Hit Pashtut Aleph reawakens and draws Or Hakma once more. This completes the permanent will to receive in the Partsuf that appears as yearning. When there weren't Or Hakma in the Partsuf, but Or Hasidim after Bihina Gimel, when the Ne'etzal could yearn for Or Hakma. So what is it saying here? So it's saying that you have 2 types of light. Bihina Aleph got the Or Hakma, Bihina Bet, or Bina, got the Or Hasidim. And then in the Gimel, there was a completion of both lights. There was a realization in the second stage where the desire said, I can't exist this way. This isn't satisfying my ego, and it developed further. So we have Hakma, Bihina Aleph, which is the perfect reception of light. Then we have a restriction in Bihina Bet, where the vessel says, no, I'm not taking it all. I want to somehow find a way to negotiate with this light so I can grow. So in Bihina Bet, the Or Hasidim comes. There's a refusal of light there. There's a refusal of Or Hakma there. Then it realizes in the next stage that I can't exist this way. I need to receive something. So it goes to a third stage called Bihina Gimel. In the stage of Bihina Gimel, it's receiving only because it has to satisfy the Creator in this degree. So it's saying that, well, I've now learned from the 0 and the 1 stage, right, from the Aleph and the Bet stage, that I have to receive something, that my ego wants, and it's growing farther away from source, and I need something here. So I'll receive a little bit, but only because it's part of what the Creator wants, or seemingly. After the above 3 Behinot fully emerge, the force of the will to receive incorporated in the Hit Pashtut Aleph reawakens and draws Or Hakma once more. This completes the permanent will to receive in the Partsuf that appears as yearning. When there weren't Or Hakma in the Partsuf but Or Hasidim after Bihina Gimel, when the Ne'etzal could yearn for the Or Hakma. It is this yearning that determines the will to receive in him and completes his vessels of reception, which was absent in Hit Pashtut Aleph. For that reason, the vessels of reception are completed only in this Bihina Dalet, also called Hit Gabrut Bet. So, what does this mean? Okay, this means that in Aleph there was a stage, in Bet there was a stage, in Gimel there was a stage, in Dalet there was a stage. This is the describing of the details of the Hit Pashtut, that drawing away from source. And it's showing us the 4 degrees to what created that final Dalet, that final Malhut of Ein Sof. And right now this is meaningless because I don't care, it doesn't matter to me what this means, and I have no way to connect to this. But this is how a desire is born. And that's important later because we're going to understand how to reverse the desires, okay, later in the Partsuf. So we're going to hear about this a lot, and we're going to conquer this later, further as we go through the text. Once Bihina Dalet was completed in Ein Sof, the Zimzum occurred in her, meaning the departure of the will to receive from Bihina Dalet, causing the departure of the Or Ein Sof from there. So as the desire grew and became the Malhut of Ein Sof, there was a restriction that came into play because it needed to be made there by the desire. Okay, this contemplates the explanations of the 4 Behinot that must exist in every Ne'etzal. Bihina Aleph is called Hit Pashtut Aleph, or Hakma. Bihina Bet is called Hit Gabrut Aleph, or Bina. Bihina Gimel is called Hit Pashtut Bet, or Zer Ampin. And Bihina Dalet is called Hit Gabrut Bet, or Malhut. So we're really looking at the... Oh, go ahead.
Like here, like they really give me, because they give me the two differences of a language. If Pashtut is an extension, it expands from up above. The Gabrut, it's an overcoming, it's a refusal. And that's what comes from the second level. And that's what they're telling me here, that I receive, and suddenly there's something that, like a shame, that's what that shame that we're speaking about. And I mean gaber alav. I am overcoming it. I don't want it. I am putting myself above it, and I want to return. That's what they're telling me. And that's the way that the kli, the vessel, is created. Through those levels of receiving and not wanting to receive. Receiving and not wanting to receive.
Okay, that's great. So we see that we have that vessel developed through this departure and arrival of light, like Philippe said, and so that's a great way to look at it. And as he pointed out, we're looking at two different descriptions here between Dalet and the filling of a Gimel, Bet, and Aleph, and how those changes occurred. So the vessel takes the light, it gives the light away, as Philippe said. It's a great way to look at it. Because if we take that idea that he was talking about and we apply that later, we're going to see how important that is. That occurrence happens throughout the path. Okay, that acceptance and refusal is sort of how we play the game, because there's no way I can measure or weigh anything. I don't have a scale unless I have black and white. And this is vital to the path. And so obviously that's an important step. So I'll continue here. The two expansions are regarded as males, for they are shefa that extends from the ma'atzil. Hit Pashtut Aleph is shefa of Or Hakma, and Hit Pashtut Bet is shefa of the Or Hasadim. Again, they're taking in the shame of moving away or dispelling. The two Hit Gabrut, plural for Hit Gabrut, are regarded as two females, for they are an awakening of the Ne'etzal and the intensification of the desire by his power. So as there's a place here that we get filling, we get shame, we push away, then we get desire again, we pull back, we have shame, we push away, we get the desire again because we're emptying, we pull back, we have this infinite cycle, this infinite circle that like the infinity sign, through and through. The first Hit Gabrut is the awakening of the Ne'etzal for the will to bestow, which becomes the shorish for the Or Hasadim. So let me just say what this means here. This means that the first time there's this necessary shame or pushing away of the light or moving away of the light, it generates the will to bestow. It's trying to figure out how to give by this process, okay? And this is part of development. So as this desire receives, it then wants to figure out how to give it away. And when it gives it away, it figures out that it needs it again, sort of in this cycle, okay? So it's going to go into this more as we go, but this is just sort of to bite on the little niblets here and kind of digest what you can. And Hit Gabrut Bet is the awakening of the Ne'etzal for the will to receive, which becomes the complete vessel of reception in the Partsuf. It is always referred to as Bihina Dalet. So the complete vessel of the reception in the Partsuf is always Bihina Dalet, that's Malhut. The Bihina Dalet is called the middle point in Ein Sof. It is that which the Rav refers to when he says, restricted himself in his middle point. It is called by that name, for it is a vessel of reception for the Or Ein Sof, which is immeasurable and boundless. Okay, so the only important point here is that it's called the middle, because in this perfect circle, the middle is the farthest separated point. Okay, anything outward from there is closing back in on the light. So that middle part of the circle is where we sit at the end here in our world too. Okay, for that reason, it is like a point in the interior and the middle of that Or, where the Or revolves around it and cleaves to it from all around immeasurably, and thus it can sustain the Or Elyon immeasurably and boundlessly. So the Ein Sof is surrounding this. It's actually penetrating all of it. But for the sake of what we call a restriction, where it's seemingly gone, it's surrounding this circle, and in the center is the baby. Okay, so the life force is penetrating into the baby, into the embryo in there, this full-on will, and it has this circle or this area around it that it's completely encompassed around. There's no other thing outside of this circle than the Ein Sof. However, in the vessels of reception after the Zimzum and below, meaning in the lower Netzalim, there are vessels that hold their or in their penimiut and talk. The inner, let me say it like this, meaning the lower Netzalim, the lower desires, there are vessels that hold or inside and within the body. Okay? It means that the walls of the Kolem, the Kolem, the vessels, being their four Behinot, place a gavul and a measurement on the or inside of them because of their aviut. Okay. This is, because of their strength, there is a measure of light within each of the desires. Each of the desires inside of this restriction, okay? And part of the outside light, part of the Ein Sof is contained therein to a certain degree based on their strength. All right? So we say on the one hand that there's a complete restriction of the Ein Sof so that we have a space in which the desires exist on their own. But at the same time, it's saying that the Ein Sof also exists within the desires themselves. It's part of them. Okay? So it's sort of a weird thing to understand. Is it there? Is it not there? So for the sake of us getting this, there are sparks or pieces or a little flame, baby flame inside of the desire still that resides, that gives the desires their energy and life and sort of their... go ahead. Go ahead, Philippe.
It's like what you're telling me. It's like the vessel itself is restraining the light indeed. The pnimiut, the inside, the light get inside the body. The tor is really the body, the garment of the vessel. And so they tell me the thickness of my walls of the vessel of the tor is restricting the light to go out. So I am separating it. I'm getting it more inside. And that's what they're telling me here. And this is my aviut, my thickness. That's what it causes that I'm not able to totally get one with the light. I am keeping some light for me. That's not the development. And I think after they're talking about the next level on the next sentence.
Okay, so we have, however, an Ein Sof where Or and Kli are in simple unity, meaning he is one and his name is one. The Kli does not limit the Or that it holds. Hence, the Or in it is regarded as Ein Sof. Now we have thoroughly explained the issue of the middle point of Ein Sof. And I just want to touch on this because I think Philippe made a good point. So, before we move on, and I'm not sure that we will, but before we at least go on from here in another chat, there is the light outside of the restriction that's endless and boundless and infinite. And there's the light that's within the vessel. Between that light in the vessel and the infinite light outside of the vessel are as an exterior clothing or shielding or layers. That layer, those layers are necessarily the will to receive to some degree. That's hiding the two lights from merging once again. So we can see it as a dot inside of the vessel and the endless outside of this restriction. And in between that is layers. And those layers are the restricted, the differences in form that restrict down to that point in the middle of the restriction. We are going to talk about and conquer those layers. That's the whole purpose of Kabbalah, is to understand those layers and penetrate those layers once again and reveal that greater light more and more as we penetrate. And those are called corrections or tikkun, and we'll get into all of that as well. I know it's late, Philippe, and you're probably exhausted. Does anyone have any questions at all for anybody here?
I'd like maybe to try to explain, because a lot of us, we think our purpose is really to create the Kli. And it seems like this. That's what we hear a lot. But here what they're telling me is I'm creating the Kli, but since the Kli has a difference of form with the light, it is not as unity with the light. It is not as unity with the Ein Sof. So what we're trying, we created the Kli to really re-elevate it and diminish the Kli to its maximum, to have a complete Vekut with the Creator, that there will be no difference of form no more. And as long as I have a Kli, and by my thickness of my Kli, which is at the beginning, I am not able really to be one, completely one with the Ein Sof, because I'm keeping something within. I'm not able to let it go. So, and I think that's what we really discovered here.
Yeah, that's great. So that's perfect. So really, if we break it down to that simplicity, the whole purpose of life is just to get through the layers. That really, we just have to find the differences between our current state and the state we need to be in to make that revelation. That's it. So all of this text we've read really breaks down to the fact that there was a building of layers between these two states, and we have to discover how to remove those layers. And that desire that we have, like Philippe mentioned, is not really what we're looking to create. We're not changing the desires. We're not changing anything. We're changing the way in which we utilize the desire in the lights. And that's the purpose of kind of digging into this in depth. So we really fundamentally understand how we function and how we work internally. And we don't just say that, we hear all the time, we hear somebody say, well, if you just love, then you'll find peace and you'll be corrected. This isn't necessarily the truth, because I haven't found one person that just loves that is corrected yet. Okay, and I necessarily haven't found anybody that just loves that can teach me how to just love. We have to understand this in a more technical idea. We have to understand the construct of it, and we really have to work inside on it. Correction and revelation is work. It's not something that's done by someone else. We know that. And it's not something that happens to me because I happen to write myself affirmations every day. This is the ego lying to us. This isn't real revelation. So in order to do that, we take these texts and we tear them apart. We figure out exactly what they're trying to say. And through that, we're able to unify much faster and much easier, because we understand that the vehicle which we're driving.